And it just gets crazier from there.
Yeah, yeah. So escapism, I think when we talk about video games and escapism, there's nothing else like it. I mean, not reading, not whatever, playing sports, watching movies. There's nothing else as I use the analogy of being addictive. I say that video games are the new heroin and cell phones are the
Mhm.
new cigarettes because you kind of like pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. Where heroin,
Yeah.
you shoot up and you're like gone for like a few hours. But there's there's a direct correlation to the amount of time spent. Way more time is spent playing video games than reading a book. Or even if you go back to the past before video games, how much time, there's always been readers, people love to read. How much time on average did the average reader spend, or the average person who watches movies or whatever, you know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
something about this genre that just consumes people. They get lost in it.
Um, Reaching back a little bit, the only reason why we're able to pull up how much time people spend in video games versus books and movies is because we have something physical to be able to record with it. We have no idea how much people would waste their time into the books or waste their time into the movies. We have an idea involving the movies. All you have to do is look at ticket sales. But we don't really have that main record. Video games is just the next level in what we consume in mass. It would have been something else entirely. And if there was something that came out that interacted about as well as a video game, but wasn't on a screen or wasn't on an arcade, we'd be just engrossed in that as well. And we very well end up transitioning out of video games into something else later on. People are on their phones more often, playing games on their phones, almost more often than consoles. And PC has become more accessible, and interactivity has become more accessible outside of video games. And we're expected, at some point, it's expected to continue to push forward later on. Whatever we end up resting on will be the next big thing that we will consume in mass. It doesn't really change. We just have something different to change with. There's a picture I like to troll people with sometimes, where it's from an old 1930s or no 1940s picture of a 40s or 50s, it's a subway train. So I think 50s. And they were talking about like video games are just consuming everyone's time. No shit. It's just a simple taken photo of an entire row on a subway or train of everybody with their newspapers up. Not
Yeah.
one person interacting with each other.
Yeah.
It's never changed. We have been the same way that we will be from like the past several hundred years into the future. It's just something different to consume.
I think you're onto something. I think there's always a desire to sort of get lost into something. And
Yeah.
if you think about like people into like meditation, and people always talk about being present. I have an issue with that. What does that mean, being present? Because you could be completely present in a video game, right? You could be completely present in a lot of different ways. So that brings up the question I could have hinted to before when we were talking, like, why is there a difference between a person, a young man, let's say the 1950s, because you brought that up, right? Baseball
Mm-hmm.
was really huge in our culture. Everybody read about it. Almost everybody played it. So what's the difference of a young
Yep.
man playing baseball all day with his friends, say, and vice playing video games at home alone? Or do you feel there is no difference?
Um, the correlation, if you ask me from like the 90s and the 80s and 90s, I would say the correlation doesn't work the same way. Closer along the lines that you want to say is there a major difference between reading a book for hours and hours versus playing a video game hours and hours?
Okay.
Nowadays, between playing baseball all day, playing video games all day, the only major difference is how much physical activity. Because with video games now, those same friends can just link up with their own systems or their own video games or even over a phone, and they're hanging out with each other in the game together.
Sort of virtually.
Yeah, and you can have multiple and with customized characters. And I was playing with a friend of mine on video game Halo, and I just have standard drab little green armor. she's got cat ears and like pink with little flames on the side. All right. But that's her. I can look and like, that's her. I can recognize that's her very easily. Compared to being outside, I can also recognize that's her. So the comparison that you're giving doesn't quite work the same.
Okay.
But nowadays, video games, yeah, people play with each other more, or play with each other in video games about the same amount as they played baseball around that time. And that's